My name is Renata Cole. I am 41 years old, and I used to believe that the hardest thing I would ever carry home from a night shift was exhaustion. I was wrong about that. I was wrong in a way that took me years to understand, and by the time I finally did, I was standing on my own porch watching my father walk toward me like he owned the steps. Let me start where it actually started in my dark kitchen, at 6 in the morning, still wearing my hospital ID badge, still smelling faintly of antiseptic, my feet sending quiet complaints up through the soles of shoes that had run miles of corridor without stopping. I had just finished 13 hours managing a trauma floor that had no interest in cooperating, and my body knew it. My hands felt like they belonged to someone older. My eyes were doing that thing where the edges of the room go soft no matter how many times you blink. I wanted coffee. I wanted silence. I wanted the particular mercy of taking off my shoes and sitting in a chair without anyone needing anything from me for at least 8 hours. What I got instead was my phone buzzing with messages from the family group chat. My father had posted room assignments for my cabin. Not asked. Not suggested. Posted. Like he was announcing a schedule at a venue he managed. He had put himself and my mother in the primary bedroom because, as he wrote, parents deserve comfort on a vacation. My brother Derek and his family had the larger guest room. My sister Vanessa had requested the room with the best morning light because she needed it for filming. Cousins were bringing air mattresses. Someone had asked whether the dock could accommodate a rented pontoon. Someone else wanted to know if I kept enough towels for children. 20 people. 3 days. Friday through Monday. I had not been asked. Not once. Before I could even form a response, my mother Louise sent her own message underneath. She told me to fill the fridge before everyone arrived, to make sure there were enough clean towels, and to behave so I would not ruin the weekend for the family. I stood in my dark kitchen, still wearing the shoes I had spent the last 13 hours running a hospital in, and read that word. Behave. Like I was 12. Like my property was a venue she had reserved and I was a difficult catering detail she needed to manage. I looked at those words for a long moment, and something inside me went completely still. Not hot. Not loud. Still. The way a room goes still before a pressure system breaks. I typed one word. No. The chat went quiet. For almost a full minute, nothing. Then my mother sent laughing emojis. Real ones. Multiple. And wrote underneath them, "You really think you can stop us?" I set my phone down on the counter. I did not explain. I did not justify. I let them believe whatever they needed to believe, because the people in that chat were not speaking to me. They were speaking to the version of me I used to be. The one who would panic and elaborate and soften and compromise until everyone else got what they wanted. That woman had spent years cleaning other people's messes out of a home she had paid for alone. That woman was done. I work as the overnight charge nurse for a trauma ICU at a level 1 hospital in Nashville, Tennessee. People hear the title and picture something organized. Clipboards, calm decisions, bright corridors. The reality is that my shift begins when everyone else hopes the night will stay quiet. And the night almost never agrees. A trauma arrives through the bay doors. A nurse calls out sick when we are already running short. A patient tries to leave against medical advice at 2 in the morning. A machine fails. A family loses patience. A hallway fills. And somehow I am supposed to locate a solution before the whole unit feels the pressure of not having one. I have learned to drink coffee that went cold 2 hours ago without tasting the difference. I have learned to answer one phone while reading a chart while listening to someone cry in the hallway. I have learned that being calm does not mean you are not exhausted. It means exhaustion does not get to make the decisions tonight. For years I picked up extra shifts and covered holidays and told myself there would be a reason. That reason became the cabin. It sat in a small gated community near a private reservoir about 40 minutes outside Nashville. It was not grand, that was never the point. It was warm and quiet, with a wraparound porch, a stone fireplace, a kayak rack down by the water, and a kitchen window so well positioned that the morning light came through it like something you could hold in your hands. I bought it because I needed one place, just one where nothing was broken and nothing needed fixing and no one was standing at the threshold waiting for me to solve something. Dominic understood that before I had the language for it. He is a high school band director, patient in the way people become patient when their whole job is guiding someone else through difficulty. He never needed the cabin to be anything impressive. He needed it to be the place where I could sleep past 7 without guilt, where we could take the kayaks out before the rest of the water woke up, where I could sit on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders and remember, slowly, that I was a person and not just the woman everyone called when something went wrong. My father, Raymond, saw the cabin and saw something else entirely. Raymond spent 30 years as a regional fleet supervisor, the person everyone checked with before they moved, the person who organized and directed and approved. Retirement arrived and the phone stopped ringing. The rooms got smaller. And then I bought a cabin on a reservoir, and the family started talking about it at Sunday dinners, and Raymond found a way to be essential again. He started calling it our place on the water. He started telling people he and I had found a great spot together, as if he had driven up the hill beside me to sign the paperwork. He started arriving at family gatherings with the easy authority of a man who had his own key to a house he did not own. I want to be honest about something. I understand how he got there. I don't excuse it, but I understand it. Retirement is a kind of grief nobody announces correctly, and some people fill the space it leaves with borrowed significance. Raymond didn't sit down one evening and decide to take something from me. He gradually, sincerely, completely convinced himself that my success was the fruit of his investment, and that his access to it wasn't entitlement. It was return on something he had given. That belief was never challenged. Not once. Because every time a door should have closed, I left it open. The pattern started the way these things always do, small enough that each incident felt too minor to fight about. Derek texted one Thursday asking if the cabin was free for his kids. He didn't wait for my answer before texting again to ask where the life jackets were stored. He called 20 minutes after my no to tell me he had already informed his wife. His assumption had already built its own momentum, and my refusal had become the disruption, a problem I had created by answering too late. I gave in because I was tired, and the math of fighting seemed harder than the math of allowing it. When Dominic and I went down the following weekend, one of the paddles was gone. A kayak had a crack along its hull, and the outdoor rug had been rolled up wet and shoved in a closet. Derek said kids were kids. He said it in the tone people use when they have no intention of paying for anything. Vanessa was a different kind of problem. She ran a wellness and lifestyle account online and had a following she described as significant and wielded as a credential. She asked to use the cabin for a quiet retreat, which became 3 days of filming workouts on my dock, smoothie content in my kitchen, and sunrise footage with my reservoir behind her. I found out when a comment on one of the posts asked if the property was available to rent. I opened the page, and there was my home, my private home, tagged publicly as the Dwyer family cabin. The fireplace, the porch, the dock in the golden hour light, all of it offered to strangers as a backdrop for my sister's brand. I asked her to remove the posts. She told me I was overreacting. She said authentic family content was what people connected with. She said there was nothing wrong with sharing something beautiful. She said sharing, like my permission, was already included. I tried rules after that. I made a shared calendar. I wrote out policies, guest limits, parking guidelines, quiet hours, no filming, no sharing the address publicly. Everyone agreed. And I eventually understood that agreeing was simply the path of least resistance when you have no intention of changing. Dominic saw the truth before I was ready to say it. One evening, after 2 hours of cleaning crumbs from sofa cushions and sunscreen off bathroom walls, he stood in the hallway holding a wet towel someone had left in a coat closet and said very quietly, "They don't ask anymore. They announce." I told him he didn't understand my family. He said he thought he understood them quite well. I hated that sentence for about 4 minutes. Then I walked into the kitchen and saw a cabinet hinge hanging loose, a sticky ring on the wood countertop, and a bag of trash by the back door that Derek had promised in a text he had already taken out. And something settled over me. Not anger. Clarity. My family had not become careless suddenly. They had learned, over years, that the cost of carelessness was zero. I had always cleaned. I had always paid. I had always forgiven and called it keeping the peace. They were not confused about my limits. They were counting on me not to enforce them. The weekend that finally changed me came in early summer after the worst stretch I had worked in 3 years. We had been short-staffed for 11 consecutive days. 2 critical patients in the same night. A family in the waiting room that had moved from grief to anger to legal threats so quickly that everyone on the floor was still carrying it by the next morning shift. I finished my last shift of the week and sat in the parking garage for 8 minutes with my hands on the steering wheel before I trusted my own driving. Dominic was waiting by the car. He took one look at me and said we were going to the cabin. No visitors. No planning. Just sleep, quiet water, and whatever food we could throw in a cooler. I called my mother while we were unpacking just to say where I was, and that I needed the weekend to be quiet. She made the soft, understanding sound I had confused for love most of my life, and said, of course. Honey. Rest. 3 hours later, I heard tires on gravel, then another vehicle, then a third. I stepped onto the porch and watched my parents climb out of a silver SUV. Behind them came Derek, his wife, his 2 kids, then Vanessa with a camera bag slung over her shoulder, then 2 cousins carrying a folding table between them. They had coolers, bags of charcoal, beach towels, pool floats still in their packaging, a Bluetooth speaker already playing music, and the complete confidence of people who had never been told no in a way that stuck. My father came up the steps smiling. He said, "See? This is exactly what you needed. Family around you." He believed that. Fully. Genuinely. Believed it. I should have told them all to leave right then. Instead, old training took over. I managed. I reminded people about shoes at the door. I pointed to the outdoor bins. I asked the kids to stay back from the dock edge. I told Vanessa not to film the front of the property. Nobody listened for longer than a few minutes. By afternoon, music was coming from every corner of the porch. Wet towels had been thrown over dining chairs. The kids were tracking reservoir mud across the hardwood, and nobody was stopping them. Vanessa had invited a photographer friend because the afternoon light was perfect. My mother was rearranging my kitchen to make things easier to find, and looked genuinely offended when I asked her to stop. My father sat at the head of the outdoor table directing people like he owned the dock, telling a cousin where to park, telling Derek where to move the coolers. A neighbor texted to ask if everything was all right because cars were blocking the lane. 15 minutes later, community patrol stopped by. They were calm and thorough. Guest limits, noise levels, dock access, vehicle count. I stood there and apologized for a gathering I had never agreed to host. My father told the patrol officer they were just having a family holiday and laughed like rules existed for other people. By dinner, I could barely stand the sound of my own home. Barbecue sauce had been spilled on the outdoor rug. Derek had backed his truck up the side path and taken out 2 landscape lights. Vanessa was filming in my kitchen, smiling into her camera, saying nothing restores you like a family lake weekend. I asked her to stop. She rolled her eyes, and my father heard it and stood from his chair and said loud enough for everyone on the porch to hear, "Why build a place this size if you're going to be small about sharing it?" The porch went quiet. That specific quiet when everyone recognizes cruelty but nobody wants to be the one to name it. My mother looked at the table. Derek became very interested in the grill. Vanessa checked her phone. Dominic's jaw tightened and he looked at me, waiting. He always waited for me. I looked at my father and saw, without decoration, what had always been true. He did not believe the cabin was evidence of my sacrifice. He believed it was the dividend on his investment. In his private accounting, every meal he made, every school year he funded, every birthday gift he gave had been a loan I did not know I was signing. And if he could turn my home into a family resource, then what I had built would not feel like mine anymore. It would feel, somehow, like his. Not because he was cruel, because his entire sense of himself depended on it. That was the last night I allowed it. Not dramatically, not in a speech. I drove back to Nashville with my head against the window and didn't cry, because I was too tired even for that. But somewhere between the reservoir and the city, something inside me answered a question I had been avoiding for years. Done. After that, I changed, not loudly, quietly. The way real changes happen. I changed the smart lock code. I removed the emergency access code my father had insisted on for safety. I called the community management office and informed them that a gathering had been announced at my address without my authorization and that all prior guest passes connected to my family members should be deactivated immediately. The manager remembered the incident from that weekend. She did not sound surprised. I sent a written confirmation by email. 2 approved occupants for the upcoming weekend. Myself and Dominic, no exceptions. I checked the security cameras. I set motion alerts on every entry point. I arranged an extra patrol circuit near the gate during the window I knew cars would arrive. Then I opened Vanessa's social media page and took screenshots of every post that used my property with a public tag. I saved them in a folder on my desktop. And I saved the family group chat every room assignment my father had posted. Every message about the pontoon deposit, every logistical question asked to me like I was the event coordinator, and my mother's message telling me to fill the fridge and behave. Dominic came into the kitchen while I was reviewing everything. He read over my shoulder and then looked at me carefully and asked, "Can you live with what comes after this?" I knew what he meant. My father's rage, my mother's grief. Derek accusing me of punishing children who hadn't done anything wrong. Vanessa performing injury online for her audience. Relatives who would hear Raymond's version first. I sat with all of it. Then I thought about the alternative. 20 people in my home. My bedroom assigned to my parents. My kitchen rearranged. My dock occupied by people who had broken it before. My name used to give others access to a life I had built while everyone else slept through the holidays I worked. My food, my towels, my privacy, my peace handed out by a man who had never paid for a single day of any of it. I told Dominic, I can live with them being angry. I cannot live with teaching them again that I don't mean what I say. On Friday morning, Dominic and I drove to the cabin with groceries for two. My phone buzzed the entire drive. Derek asking about overflow parking. Vanessa asking whether the guest bathroom had north light for a transition reel. My mother asking if I had bought enough fruit. Nobody mentioned my no. Nobody asked if I had changed my mind. They were all driving toward a door they believed my guilt would open before they arrived. They were wrong. At 1:43 in the afternoon, my security camera showed the first SUV at the gate. Then a second. A third. I watched from the porch as the line of vehicles gathered, coolers strapped down, chairs visible through rear windows, my father in the lead car leaning forward with the posture of a man whose certainty had always been enough before. The gate did not open. The community security guard called my line. Professional even. He said a group was insisting they had permission to access my property for a family weekend. I could hear my father's voice rising in the background, that particular tone I had spent my whole life watching clear rooms. I told the guard they had no permission. I told him no one in the group was authorized to enter. He thanked me and the call ended. My phone lit up immediately with my father's name. I let it ring twice. Not because I was afraid, because I wanted to feel just once the difference between being summoned and choosing to answer. When I picked up, he didn't say hello. He said, "What did you do to the house?" Loud and tight the way a man sounds when authority has just failed him in public. I looked at the two coffee mugs Dominic had set out beside the sink, at the morning light coming through my kitchen window, at the quiet that had cost me years of night shifts and holidays to build. And I said, I protected it. He told me people had driven hours. He told me children were tired. He told me I was embarrassing him in front of the family. That last one told me everything. Not the children. Not the hours. The embarrassment. His. In front of people, he had promised something he had no right to promise. I said, I told you no. This is private property. No one has my permission to enter. Then I ended the call. The group chat erupted immediately, messages stacking over each other. Derek said I should have warned people. I sent a screenshot of my no. Vanessa said I had ruined a confirmed content partnership and made her look unprofessional to a sponsor. I sent her a screenshot of the public post she had placed, tagging my property before I agreed to anything. My mother wrote that I was being cruel, that I had humiliated my father, that this was not how she raised me. I sent her own message back into the chat. The one telling me to fill the fridge and behave. The chat went silent. And then my Aunt Carol typed a question that changed the direction of the entire afternoon. Raymond, did Renata actually approve this? He didn't answer. Another relative said he had personally promised her everything was arranged. A cousin said she had rescheduled work specifically because Raymond had guaranteed the cabin was open. Someone asked why room assignments had been posted if I had never given consent. The word that surfaced and stayed was not family or tradition or generosity. It was permission. And he had never had it. He called back. Quieter this time, which in some ways was more threatening than the shouting. He said, after everything I have invested in you, this is how you repay me. He said I had forgotten where I came from. He said he had sacrificed, had given me the foundation, had made me possible. I said, children are not repayment plans. I said, I am grateful you raised me, and I am an adult telling you no, and those are not a contradiction. He started to raise his voice again. I ended the call. Outside the gate, the weekend he had designed and distributed and promised collapsed in real time. Some relatives turned around immediately, embarrassed and exhausted. Others sat in their vehicles pulling up hotel booking apps and calling rental companies in the middle of peak season when the nearest available rooms were 40 minutes away and expensive. The pontoon deposit was non-refundable. Vanessa's photographer charged for the blocked time. Derek had to explain to his children, in a hot car at the side of a road, why the weekend he had promised them was not going to happen. My father spent the afternoon securing motel rooms on his own credit card, answering questions he could not answer truthfully without confessing the simple fact at the center of everything. He had offered access to a home he did not own, to people who trusted him, and he had done it so completely, so convincingly, that he never once considered the door might not open. He had been generous. He was just generous with something that wasn't his. That is the part I keep returning to. There is a specific kind of person who builds their generosity entirely from someone else's resources. They give access, they invite, they plan, they assign. And it feels real, the generosity is real, it is only the ownership that was never theirs to give. For years, Raymond's identity was built on being the person who made things happen, who directed, who provided. When his own domain shrank, he borrowed mine. And because I never locked the door, he never had to examine whether the key was actually his. A gate does not negotiate. That was the only language left. That evening, I sat on my porch while the water went dark and still, and the tree line absorbed the last of the light. No strange cars in the driveway. No one in my kitchen. No music I didn't choose. No one standing on my dock feeling proud of themselves for being there. Dominic brought out 2 glasses and sat beside me without speaking for a long time, which was exactly what I needed. I said eventually, "I should have done this years ago." He said, "You did it now." In the weeks after, a few relatives reached out privately. My Aunt Carol apologized and admitted she had genuinely believed my father had contributed to buying the property because he had never been corrected when he implied it. A younger cousin said she never would have come if she had known I had already said no. These apologies didn't restore years, but they mattered because the story was no longer Raymond's to tell. The gate had told its own story, without sentiment, without his editorial, without anyone to spin it. My father sent a long email. Arrogance, cruelty, ingratitude, betrayal, every word a man uses when he has lost leverage and cannot accept the silence that follows. I read it once, saved it, did not respond. Not every accusation deserves a defense. Some of them are simply proof that the hook no longer catches. The following Saturday morning, Dominic and I took the kayaks out before the reservoir woke up. The water was still, the air carrying that early coolness that disappears by 9. I paddled out past the midpoint and turned back to look at the cabin. At the porch where my father had called me small for protecting what I built. At the door that had stayed closed because I finally understood something I should have understood years earlier. A door that opens, every time someone expects it to, is not a door. It is an apology. What I want you to take from this, the thing I had to learn the hard way at 41 years old, is that the people who are most upset when you enforce a limit are almost never upset because you hurt them. They are upset because you stopped being useful in the way they had relied on. That grief is real, but it is theirs to carry, not yours to prevent. The mistake I made for years was believing that one more explanation would be enough. One more demonstration of my reasoning. One more attempt to make my no sound like something they could respect. But, with certain people, reasoning is just another form of negotiation, another opportunity to wear you down. The only thing that works is the thing I finally did. Quiet, clear, and followed through. So here's the question I want to leave with you tonight. Is there somewhere in your life where you have been saying no with your words and yes with your actions? Where you explain, where you justify, where you hope and then clean up afterward anyway? Because that is not a boundary. That is a suggestion. And suggestions, as I learned, are simply an invitation to push further. You don't need a gated community or a smart lock to start. You just need to understand that the people around you are learning every day what your limits actually are, not from what you say, but from what you allow. Pick one thing where the answer should be no. Let it be no. Said once. Held. And if someone laughs at you the way my mother laughed at me, let the gate answer for them. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a 1 inch the comments if you think I handled this exactly right. Drop a 2 if you think I should have had one final honest conversation before the lockout. Drop a 3 if there is a Raymond in your own life, and something in this story hit closer than you expected. And tell me where in the world you are right now, what time it is, what the light looks like outside your window. I find myself wondering how far a story like this travels when it finds the right person. If you are still here, if something in this reached you, subscribe and come back. I tell stories about people who stopped making themselves small for people who never noticed the cost. There is a new one every week. I think you belong here. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Nashville, Tennessee, to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental.